Is it not true that in the best of times, human nature still sinks into the worst abyss?
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. These words are not merely a rhetorical flourish, but a sweeping portrait of late 18th century Europe, an age teetering on the threshold between the old and the new. Science and reason were breaking through the chains of tradition, and the seeds of new ideas were spreading swiftly among intellectuals. Yet at the same time, poverty, hunger, oppression, and injustice gnawed at the very fabric of society. London and Paris serve as mirrors reflecting this contradiction. In London, life was not without hardship, but order still prevailed. There remained a fragile trust in law and institutions. Paris, however, was a city trembling on the brink of fury. The extravagance of the aristocracy clashed violently with the misery of the common people, and the anger of the masses simmered beneath the surface like a coiled dragon, waiting for the moment to break free. Thus, the era itself became both radiant and shadowed, rich with hope, yet steeped in danger. And it is against this backdrop that the tale of revolution, love, and sacrifice begins to unfold.
In the midst of turbulent times, young Lucy Manette faced a profound turn of fate. She learned that her long-lost father, Dr. Alexandre Manette, had finally been released from the Bastille. 18 years of imprisonment had left him shattered, his body frail, his mind sparred, and his memories fractured by the darkness of confinement. When father and daughter first reunited, he could scarcely recognize the gentle young woman before him, his spirit still shackled to the horrors of the past. Yet Lucy, with her boundless patience and unwavering tenderness, became a light that pierced his shadows. Through her love, Dr. Manette slowly rediscovered his trust in life and found a fragile sense of peace. Their reunion was not merely the return of family bonds, but a resurrection of hope and humanity itself. At the same time, two other pivotal figures entered the stage. Charles Darnay, a young French aristocrat, had turned his back on his lineage, disgusted by the cruelty and corruption of his family. Seeking honesty and renewal, he built a new life in London, embodying quiet dignity and integrity. In contrast stood Sidney Carton, a lawyer who appeared reckless, dissolute, and lost in drink. Yet beneath his careless exterior lay sharp intelligence and a heart burdened by loneliness and unspoken yearning. The lives of these three men and Lucy soon became intertwined. From their encounters grew tender bonds of love and friendship, delicate threads that would later be tested by the storms of history and woven into a tale of conflict, sacrifice, and redemption.
As time passed, the relationships among the three began to take shape. Charles Darnay and Lucy gradually discovered a deep harmony of spirit in their daily encounters. Gentle and sincere, Darnay longed to cast off the shadow of his lineage and to build a life marked by honesty and freedom. His love for Lucy was pure and steadfast, and in time he won not only her heart, but also the blessing of Dr. Manette. Their union became more than a marriage. It was a symbol of renewal, of hope blooming in a fractured world. Yet nearby stood Sidney Carton, watching in silence. To the outside world, he was a dissipated, indolent lawyer, enslaved by drink and seemingly incapable of shaping his destiny. But within him lay a deep well of anguish and emptiness. Lucy's kindness, her gentleness, shone like a ray of light into his darkened life, revealing a happiness he had never known but could not help desiring. Carton understood, however, that he could neither win nor rightfully claim this happiness. Instead, he transformed his love into quiet devotion. He resolved that if ever the moment came, he would turn his silent affection into a promise of protection and sacrifice. For him, love became not possession, but choice. The choice to give, to guard, and, when the time arrived, to lay down everything.
Time moved forward, and in France, the storm at last broke loose. The streets of Paris burned with the fire of revolution, as years of resentment erupted in a frenzy of blood and vengeance. The Bastille fell, its massive stones crashing down as the old order crumbled. On the public square, the guillotine stood tall, its merciless blade devouring lives day after day. Cries of liberty and freedom filled the air, but the exalted voices of justice soon gave way to the blind fury of revenge. Amid this chaos, Charles Darnay was swept into the maelstrom. Though he had long renounced the cruelty of his aristocratic family, to the revolutionaries he remained the offspring of oppressors, guilty by birth, condemned without redemption. Out of loyalty and compassion, he returned to France to aid a former servant, but his selfless act led to betrayal and arrest. Irony sharpened his fate. The very lineage he had sought to reject now bound him to a sentence of death. Meanwhile, Lucy and Dr. Manette struggled desperately to save him. The doctor, once a victim of the Bastille himself, tried to appeal with his reputation and the sympathy of his past sufferings. But in the frenzy of the revolution, reason and compassion were powerless against the tide of hatred. Sidney Carton, too, came to Paris, where he witnessed the terrible extremes of human passion, the roar of crowds that drowned out individual pleas, the intoxication of bloodshed masquerading as justice. The revolution, reason and compassion were powerless against the tide of hatred. Sidney Carton, too, came to Paris, where he witnessed the terrible extremes of human passion, the roar of crowds that drowned out individual pleas, the intoxication of bloodshed masquerading as justice. The revolution's storm was no longer merely history in motion. It was the force that drove each character toward the final moment of decision, sacrifice, and destiny.
The story reaches its most moving climax, sacrifice and redemption. At the moment when Charles Darnay faces the inexorable sentence of death, destiny seems beyond reversal. It is then that Sidney Carton makes the greatest choice. He gives his life in place of Darnay, for Lucy, for her happiness, and for the dignity and principles he has long held in secret. In his final moments, Carton is calm and resolute. He feels no regret, his spirit radiating like a light piercing through the shadows of history. His famous last words, "It is the most magnificent thing I have ever done, and my soul finds its ultimate release," reveal not only the nobility of the individual, but also the extraordinary capacity for humanity to shine in the face of despair. Lucy and Dr. Manette, though mourning, feel the continuation of hope. The bonds of love and family are preserved, and Carton's selfless act elevates the meaning of life itself. The story concludes with emotions both heavy and tender, illustrating human fragility and strength, despair and brilliance within the sweeping currents of history.